Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Later. Welcome everybody to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, change, transformation. And this week we got the second part of our interview with John Muir. What we've done this week is kind of split it up into kind of bite-sized chunks for the second half, and we're going to kind of just play those through and comment on those as we play them. But as always, we have the news to kick things off. So Ben, I will start. So we've done a bit of research just with the market on overcoming the challenges to implement Blueprint 2. And these are kind of just the headline graphs out of some of the results. So this is quite interesting. First question we asked, what is the biggest positive impact Blueprint 2 will have on your business? And clearly the winner with 59% is a reduction in duplication, errors, and frictional costs. And that's fine. And you could argue that that's an outcome that will improve the client experience in the end. But I would say because only 18 people have said to improve the client experience, I think there's something to say about the lens through which people are looking at, or this transformation project is focused on. It's through an operational efficiency lens rather than a customer outcomes lens.
Yes, I think you're right, Jeremy. Completely.
And I think it's quite interesting. My analysis of this, without going too deep into the actual comments, is that what you lose if you do that is the opportunity to actually just tear it all up and go, how would we do this if we had a blank piece of paper, rather than starting with, right, what are the processes and operations that we've got now that we need to make more efficient? How could we actually rework this and transform this completely? So I think it's quite an interesting answer and how it's being perceived there in that slide.
Yeah, and I think the point is that in other industries the customer or marketing, if you like, is seen as an investment, and I think it's seen as a cost in this industry. And so you've got this huge operational focus and cost focus the whole time, but not the growth focus, I think. And that's evident in the sort of answers. And we've seen these types of responses before. So it's quite introspective, really, compared with other industries. And this, you might argue, this is where some of the issues over trust come, because you're not really joining up or selling the benefits of any change and transformation. So I think that goes for anybody internally as well. They're just simply going through the motions of change, and then there's a number on a spreadsheet, as opposed to something that I think is much more rewarding, which is happy customers, recognition for the job you did, and commercial success.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's another couple of highlights as well from this survey. So what is the biggest operational challenge you envisage when implementing Blueprint 2? And this is quite interesting because it's evenly split between the challenges there. So depending on which organization is answering this, depends on obviously the priority that they've got, whether that's technology, data, resources, change management skills. But what it does say to me is that these are big problems. There isn't just one thing to fix in this implementation of Blueprint 2. There's a whole plethora of things, and they're big, complex challenges in themselves, let alone as part of a grand design.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder whether it also means that businesses are not really strategically focused. They haven't really worked through what the one thing is, because when you do strategy, you work out what the kernel of the problem is, that's the intellectual challenge. I know this is one of those where these are sort of four things here thrown out as that's a problem, and here's another one, and here's another one, and here's another one. I would say that's quite early stage type strategic, well, not particularly strategic. It's just these are all the issues and we've got to solve them, but you've got to prioritize and you've got to decide what you're not going to do.
Yeah. Finally, in this, there's a whole load of questions, but this is quite an interesting one that we've talked about before. I just thought I'd ask the question whether, given the success of digital adoption during COVID, whether this was the beginning of the end of Lloyd's real world underwriting room. 46% said yes, 54 no, fairly much split down the middle. I know you've said it already, Ben, but you believe it is, or at least it needs to change.
Yes, I believe it is in its current form. I don't think it'll survive as a trading environment alone. I think it needs to be reinvented some way, shape, or form. I think Lloyd's has hinted at that. Carnegie Brown has hinted at that. And I think some of the thinking is around bigger spaces that complement the office environment. Lloyd's has potentially got opportunity to do that. I think this answer there is another of those flip of the coin ones, isn't it? I don't necessarily know. 50-50.
Yeah.
Could go either way. I mean, the determinant, of course, is Lloyd's itself as to what it decides it wants to do. Because my view is that Lloyd's could have changed and perhaps should have changed the room and the format a few years ago, at least, and that it sort of put that thing off. But now I think there'll be other pressures like cost pressures. I've heard, new businesses are saying we're not going to take space in the Lloyd's room because it's very expensive, and we can do that in our own offices. The big question really, though, is if that goes and changes, what does it do to EC3, and what happens to the fact that all those businesses are clustered around that Lloyd's building, and that is the ecosystem. If it goes, you might see a dispersal of that, as you've seen in other professional and financial sectors.
Yeah, it's really interesting. They had a piece on Radio 4 yesterday, and they were just looking at Norwich and the impact of Aviva on that town centre. Yeah. They've got 5,000 employees there, and if half of them are working at home at any one time, what are the implications for those ancillary services and, as you say, the kind of everything else around it? It's going to be fascinating to see how it all pans out. That's for sure. Right. Next bit of news. So I saw this in the journal, the CII. So National Random Acts of Kindness Day. So two things on this. Firstly, they've given it an acronym already, RAOK. Of course you would do, because you're in insurance. It's got to be an acronym. But why is a Random Acts Day needed? And surely, if you're only doing random acts on a prescribed day, then it isn't that random.
No, you know they're coming, don't you?
Yeah, you're getting ready for it on the 17th.
Randomly impact you on May the 13th or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not being a spoilsport. We don't need a day to do random acts of kindness. Cats of kindness. That would be better. That would be a better day. Random cats of kindness.
Random cats. I think, no. Well, I think I know they're trying to bring attention to it, but I think random acts of kindness are from the heart. You just do them.
Yeah. There we are. So that's my news. You've got some news, Ben. Picking up on the football and the ESL stuff that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. So
I've been looking at part of my week has been looking at brand measures, the sort of personality brand measures that we use in a lot of our work. And I was looking back at a study that was done, a report that was done in 2005, which was looking at industry sectors and personalities and personality types. And these two attributes here, honest and innovative, are two of the key attributes that we and others use. So they're kind of fairly obvious. They apply to people, but they also apply to corporates. And what you can see, which I think is pertinent and rather hilarious, is that insurers are down at the bottom of the innovation chart. This was in 2005, remember. I don't know where insurers would be now. So they're sort of middling on the honesty front. But football clubs, which we have spoken about in the last couple of weeks with the ESG, are right at the bottom. And I have a very strong belief that brand measurement is really, really important, because it's the one area where you can see problems coming. And so 2005, this is what they wrote. They said that the most striking part of this figure is that football clubs are seen as sinister. Not only is honest the most important dimension, but the gap between football clubs and the other industries is the widest one observed anywhere. Presumably, this is being caused by shifty club dealings and disreputable player behaviour, but the magnitude of the gap is still astonishing. Even though gate receipts contribute a shrinking proportion of revenues, surely clubs cannot afford to take their fan bases for granted. As such, the sport must be being damaged by having such an unfriendly image. Whoever wins the Premiership this season should temper their satisfaction with the knowledge that the whole league is losing out to Alton Towers and the Odeon. So this is like, this is almost one of these sort of some people think they're apocryphal, but there was another one I know of, which was M&S and its refusal to do debit cards for many, many years, even though all the research said they should. If you don't listen, eventually it comes and bites you in the bum, as they say. And I think that's what happened here, is that it was obvious if they looked at it later.
It's fascinating stuff. It's good stuff. And parallels with insurance and what we were talking about last week with the BI claims as well. It's
yes.
Talk about this for ages. Right. Move things on. So we got, as I said, we've got the second part of our interview with John Muir, Managing Director of Technical and Operational Practices at Willis Towers Watson. Last week he was giving us his insights into the modernisation agenda and his experiences of driving change. We pick up the conversation here. What we've done is selected 5 short clips from the second half of the interview. And we pick up here where John's talking about the adoption of PPL and how COVID has impacted that. But there are still pockets of resistance to change in the industry. So let's watch this first clip. Here we go.
I was having an internal meeting just today, and we were laughing about this, where we were reflecting upon Willis's adoption of PPL and e-placement. So prior to the COVID, we'd been bashing away at it since August 2016. It was really quite ugly. We'd reached around 40% penetration, but there were so many fights internally and externally, and it was a really slow go. And then along comes the COVID. And then the COVID cures the resistance to PPL almost within a month. So virtually everybody went, well, our choices now are email or PPL. And virtually everybody went, well, obviously it's PPL. We've got to give it a go. And then the moment everybody gives it a go, there's no going back. So if you said to me, do I think our people will go back to paper when we go back to the office? No, I don't. I don't think that. Because PPL gives us so much more than paper did, and so much more than email can. But interestingly, just to let you know that you can still fight for the resistance in the London market, aerospace as a class of business is still out of scope for PPL. The reason for that being is quite a few of the aerospace underwriters think email's fine. That's very disappointing when you've got Chronic Maciata and all the mandates. They've got all these mandates going, but a very significant part of the business, and I would argue the aerospace business is a very significant part of London market's business, have successfully resisted adopting PPL. So they place their slips on a verticalized basis, which is pretty complicated, and they do it on email, which makes for a very, very messy looking event. And if you said to me, does it work? Well, it kind of works just about tolerably from a placing broker and line underwriter standpoint. But the moment you go downstream, i.e. you go into the world of A&S and claims, it's a bug's muddle. The rework and mistakes are all over the place. And to me, it's frustrating that as a market, we can't actually fix that type of problem. And that would tell me that when we go back to the office, the aerospace community will go back to paper.
Clip that because it kind of highlights what we were talking about in the news around kind of these pockets of resistance that we find, and it's a mindset mentality thing rather than a technology or whatever else. It's actually the first step of the journey is actually convincing people that this change is necessary and will benefit you, and it's really interesting.
Yes, I think it is. I was recalling Bruce Carman was saying, who for those that didn't see it, is Hive Aero and is an aviation underwriter, now running his own specialist business. A few weeks ago, was saying just how much duplication there is on the slip filling there, and so John's saying that there is now resistance. So when you think of the drivers of change, obviously the COVID scenario necessitated some of that and helped. But it's interesting how I think adoption takes place. You're right. I think it's about attitudes. I think it's about mindset, basically. And if the mindset in one place is not to use technology, then presumably that's the same everywhere. Every bit of technology is just seen as a pointless exercise. So I don't think you should do technology for technology's sake, of course, but I do think that kind of stubbornness is ultimately stops progress.
Yeah, agreed. So this next clip, we bring in the bureau. So John talks about the elephant in the room being the bureau and the need to invest in back office services. So here's the next clip.
Well, so I'm a fan of competition. So if you said to me, do I think it's healthy for PPL to have white space and then any other entrants? I think that's very healthy. And the reason that works is that that's not an established function of the Bureau. But the elephant in the room around all modernization is the Bureau. And that's not me suggesting that I'm blaming the Bureau. But what I do think is that if we got rid of the Bureau, which some people would like to, the next day somebody would come up with a really brilliant idea suggesting that we create a Bureau. Because the Bureau is the right answer. But then it's a back office function that needs to be invested in, and you need to embrace your back office. So if you said to me, how do I feel about the Willis, Towers, Watson back office? I embrace it, including the people in Mumbai. To me, they are part and parcel of the Willis, Towers, Watson client and business experience. And I would never ever say dismissively, oh, well, that's our Ipswich office or that's our Mumbai office. That's a terrible way to treat people. And nobody buys it, by the way. But the underwriters, when they're looking at it through the Lloyd's lens, all kind of behave as though the Bureau almost belongs to the broker. And of course, that's just because the brokers understand what the Bureau does. And the underwriters have decided that they don't really want to understand it. They just want to have a whipping boy. And boy, do they have one. All of these big managing agents all have non-Bureau insurance company capabilities. So they do actually understand that you've got to invest in your back office. But none of them seem to recognize that they need to actually invest in modernizing the Bureau. And the Bureau, obviously, are there to make money. Everybody's there to make money. Investing is obviously expensive. But I worry that until we get to the bottom of that particular issue. We're always going to be hidebound when people say, well, we could do this, but what about the legacy? And it's always the legacy. And the legacy, oh my goodness, if anybody could understand the size of the legacy that the Bureau manages, it's astonishing how big the legacy is. You know, look at our claims legacy, and it's just massive. It's just, we've got so many claims that are still going 10, 20, 30 years after the event. Who's going to inherit that work, and who's going to understand it? So to me, the Bureau needs to be part of the solution. And yet they're frequently not invited even into any of the meetings, because there are some people who would prefer that actually the solution would be to replace them. But I honestly can't see that replacing them is going to happen any time during my working life, because it's just because of the legacy.
Yeah, good. So investment in back office legacy claims, and it's just, I think what's interesting when John's speaking is he's just painting this picture of this monumental task that needs to be attacked and tackled. I don't think it's beyond the wit of man to do it. And to Phil's point in the chat there about investment in the Bureau and then paying for services, you know, these are complex issues, but they just need working through in a sensible way, and then coming up with, like, as you were saying at the beginning of the show, a strategic plan to deal with it. And I'm sure there's a way to run off that legacy in a sensible way.
Yeah, and I think John's points there that are not often heard, and it's really interesting to hear them from the way he speaks, is that, you know, he essentially says this is about people ultimately. This is about leadership. It's about embracing the people who matter to the business. And I think John is saying you can't just leave bits out that are very important because you just simply fancy doing that. I think that's not what good businesses do. They recognize very clearly what the contribution of all those parts is to the whole, and then the sum becomes greater. That, you know, the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts. And so the problem with the challenge, I suppose, in the London market is who's invested in what and who cares about it. And if underwriters say, well, I don't care, it's not my problem, the Bureau should just sort it out, or someone else's issue, it's just them over there. That's what I see a lot in siloed businesses. You know, it's not my problem, it's them who caused the problem. Until you bring people together to talk about this and to come up with a clear belief as to what they want to achieve, and then everybody's invested in it, it just won't happen. And John's absolutely right. There's no point in just wrapping up the Bureau because another Bureau will have to be put in. And sorry, it's exchanging, by the way, for anybody who's listening who's not sure what the Bureau is.
Yeah.
Called exchanging.
Yeah. We could do a whole show on acronyms, but anyway, so let's move on to the next one. So in this clip, John's talking about returning to the office. So a little bit follow on from what we were talking about a bit earlier about what return to the office would look like, and then the importance of claim service and what that means as well. So here's the next clip.
You know, does that mean that we're not going to go back to the office? Well, I still believe we should go back to the office, but only partly. I do believe that we can do a lot of things as efficiently, if not more efficiently, working from home. So to me, I wouldn't want to sacrifice client service. But, you know, if you said to me, there are so many elements of client service that can just be improved anyway. We shouldn't need to have the COVID to motivate us to improve performance. So to me, with claims, you look at how over-engineered small claims are. So we produced a few years ago the single claims agreement party language for contracts. And then a few years later, you discover that actually a lot of people haven't adopted it. So to me, so someone like me, I'm just bewildered by that. But I can always remember the fact that when it was first mooted, that we do this for small claims. So it only applies up to claims up to £250,000 and claims that are effectively not controversial. There was a lot of resistance, both on the broking side and on the underwriting side to it. But that's actually mostly to do with turkeys and Christmas and to do with client outcomes. And somebody should be standing up and going, client outcomes rule. But we don't have anybody doing that. So
and
just
I think,
sorry.
I was going to say, John, that the thing I've talked about a lot is also the vision about the future and what the world of work is. And if you are working in a drudge, if 3/4 of your day is kind of drudge admin, legacy, all the things you've described, but if you could paint a vision of a future where, yes, maybe jobs will change, roles will change, some will go, but those jobs will be more interesting. They'll be client-focused jobs. They'll be about ideas and new things. But at the moment, this is such a drag, isn't it? But you don't get much of that, in my view, about where not just where insurance is going, but the world is like that. Because if you just look at, for example, call centers, a lot of call centers now are actually genuinely quite interesting places to work because the technology has freed up those people from the desperately tedious kind of happy path stuff, and they're doing the problem solving stuff, and claims people like that, I think so I think it would change.
Claims people, claims people are a slight breed apart. I always remember when I first got involved with the claims community, and I was told that we're allegedly the shop window of insurance. But it feels like a board shop window. So I kind of laughed and went, so self-esteem is high in the claims community. I could never quite work, me, having never worked in claims, I actually think claims work is hugely interesting. People love to talk to me about claims and wordings as though these are drudgery jobs. And they all say that, do you realize, John, that sort of our claims community and our wordings community is aging out, rather like me. And then one day you're going to wake up and you won't have anybody who's going to know anything about claims or wordings. So I say to them, well, I completely disagree. I happen to believe in the law of supply and demand. So I think you're all worrying far too much. If we need more claims people, we need more work, then we will pay for them. And if we have to pay over the odds because we've underinvested, well, so be it. But that's how capitalism works.
Yeah.
I think,
I caught me by surprise. I thought we had another minute left on that video, but anyway, it cut off short. But there we are. As always, slick. But that was really funny. I thought the claims is a shop window, but it feels like it's boarded up. That's a brilliant line that I'm going to use. And it's interesting insight, really, especially around that small claims. And he was talking about a lot last week in the clips that we were showing last week about small claims being the real pinch point within the London market. They can't seem, after all these years, to get that area right. And resistance to change and lack of leadership, I think, is evident from what he was talking about there in that clip.
Yes, I think it's another. Again, we're pointing at what are the probably really just a siloed industry, a siloed business where claims is the language, the back office, it's boarded up shop window, or so what the underwriters think of things. I think one of the issues that I've always been very well aware of is how there is really too much emphasis on the underwriters and the broking front people, the producing brokers. I think that while they're very, very important, nobody would say that they're not. I think the industry needs to start, it is beginning to, but it's not doing enough of embracing the idea this is a team effort, you know, that you can't just have a sort of an imbalanced message all the time. And that's, I think John's point about self-esteem and claims is really well made. It's self-esteem is overused, but it still is a point about confidence. You know, claims is really, really fundamentally important part of the business. And if those teams are not confident, or they feel put upon by underwriters or even, you know, senior brokers, then it doesn't lend itself to having an industry that's going to create trust with customers, you know. So I think there's some really important points about which we've always categorized under the broad umbrella of culture, you know, and it is culture really. It's holding on to the idea that the old idea of the underwriter is the iconic you know, guru of everything, which I don't think they are nowadays. I think they're good quality professionals in a modern world, and that's what we should be looking at. You know,
yeah,
lose some of these vestiges of the past.
Yeah, very good. So we've got two more clips. These last two are really quite short. So the first one is John's take on the future at Lloyd's and whether it's too Lloyd centric. So here's the next clip.
Would I blame John Neal for being very Lloyd-centric about the future at Lloyd's work? No, I wouldn't, because I think that in the past we've tried to boil the ocean and please everybody and try and work out all the solutions, not just for Lloyd's, but for the IUA, and then for non-bureau insurers and overseas insurers, and try and boil the ocean. And we've kind of failed. So, you know, if Lloyd's can succeed, which I would like Lloyd's to succeed, there are going to be two outcomes. One, more people will do more business with Lloyd's. If Lloyd's have got a better proposition, more people, that's just a natural outcome, and good luck to them.
Yeah.
And for investing in that. Also, it's my experience that when somebody raises their game, and that's rather like that produces other people to raise their games. So there's good benefit. So I would like Lloyd's to succeed, but could they please do it quickly? If they're going to do it selfishly, then let's just do it.
Points there. I like it. You know, if they get it right, more business will come through Lloyd's, but also just the process of doing that just raises everyone, you know, it's the tide raises all the ships, doesn't it? I suppose is the phrase.
Yeah, and it's what I've said about competition. It is the one thing that runs through the market, and it's in its DNA, and it really drives things forward. You know, I think it's really, really important. Yeah, and I like his take. Get on with it. You know, just do something. Don't do everything, and that will create a shift. I think the point about speed and pace and momentum and energy is really, really important. We were talking about brand earlier on. Innovation is, you know, in our sense of an organization that has innovation or is associated with it, it's mainly about energy and drive and so on. It's not about knowing how Amazon's system works. You just feel like it's a business that's going places, right? So you call it innovative. Yeah. And that doesn't stick to Lloyd's at the moment. And that's because it's slow and sludgy feeling. And that's, change that, please.
Yeah, would be good. Right, final clip coming up. So we're asking here whether he has any radical solutions on claims, and then he goes into the importance of the claim service and coming back to this competition. So here's the final clip.
The market, you know, we're just talking about subscription here.
Yeah.
So non-subscription, you're stuck with what you're stuck with. They're your own claims, and you're going to deal with them. With subscription, to me, we need to increase the limit of the SCAP to something much more grown up, like £1 million, which, by the way, would cover then 90% of all claims at the least. It would cover 90% of all claims, and then just have the lead claims underwriter agree the claims for the whole market. That to me would solve a lot of problems. If you said to me, would I be opposed to a triage process wherein underwriters triaged simple claims to an entity who would manage them for them? If they had confidence in that entity, I wouldn't have a problem with that. That to me wouldn't be a problem. But my opinion is that's their choice. And again, this is slightly claims is a competitive environment. So Willis Towers Watson, we still carry out our biannual survey, where we survey all of our staff. You've heard about it, and I'm sure you've seen it. And we talk to people about claims service. And I'm telling you, there's a very big difference of performance in the perception of our claims specialists in the market. And that can affect and does affect insurance buying decisions. Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And I think it wouldn't be fair to, but we could all name some insurers who have really invested heavily in claims. Claim service is not always about agreeing a claim. It's about service. It's about actually showing some care and consideration for somebody who's had an event which they have found unpleasant, and how you manage that. And our experience has been that positive claims experiences generate disproportionate loyalties from clients, and negative ones result in almost always the incumbent being fired.
I think what's key in that clip is claims service. Just that phrase, it's not about signing the check and putting it in the post. It's about the experience that the client customer has along the journey to having their situation resolved. And I think a lot of the time, to John's point, people are just thinking about how quickly they can get some money to someone. Well, actually, it's a lot deeper than that. It's a claim service, and that's an area of real competitive advantage for those that get it right.
Couldn't put it better myself. And I do not still fully understand why claims is not put as front of shop. I think probably because some organisations are not confident to do it. I think the market performance, as John says, is inconsistent. I think our data shows that probably just as much as the Willis data shows that. There's some really good performances and consistent performances. It is not rocket science as to know what needs to be offered to those end customers. And it is frustrating, really, that John's point about the loyalty and the monetization of that, in effect, for the industry has not got through to into the skulls of the people who lead these insurance businesses. And it doesn't seem that it always does. And we're back to mentality. We're back to that constant feeling of why do they just not get what's staring them in the face sometimes? And we haven't got time to go into the reasons for that. But I'll give you an example, just very briefly, of a big carrier in the US that I spoke to a few years ago who started to look at their own data research into customers. And I have to say it was partly triggered by the fact they were using our data. So they said, this is interesting, let's do more, gather more of this data. And they said immediately, and this is a massive carrier, immediately we could monetize many aspects of service. We could see that if we got this right and tweaked it, we would make more money. You know, it was something that this organisation had never done. It only started it in the last couple of years, but it said it was just a revelation, you know, and that needs to happen all over the industry going forward. I hope it does.
Yeah. Me too. So that was great. I just want to thank John again for spending time talking with us and being so open and candid in his remarks.
Right.
Yeah, really good guy. So I'm going to put both. I'm going to put the whole thing on the website as well, so you can listen to the whole interview if you wish. So there we go. Right, what are we doing this weekend, Ben?
We've already discussed that tomorrow is going to be a washout, so I'm not going to do much tomorrow. I am going out walking on Sunday and then lunch, so that's quite a pleasant weekend, really.
Yeah, excellent. Good. Yeah, again, tomorrow is a washout. But yeah, Sunday, might get out on the bike. Apparently, I've got to do some gardening with a tree. Oh, well. Gardening is not my thing.
Not really mine.
No. I don't mind mowing the grass, but yeah, weeding and stuff.
I will do. I'll do a bit of mowing, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Good. Right. Thanks for tuning in. See you all next Friday. Thanks very much.
Yes, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Burgess and Bolton's Weekly Wrap Up.